Welcome to Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. I am Lorianne Casdia. Our goal here at Healthy Lifestyle is to inspire, educate, and empower you to fulfill a healthy, emotional, spiritual, and physical life so you can feel empowered to live the life you have always wanted and dreamed. Welcome to the show. I hope you're having a great day. I am a life and business transformational success coach, a #1 international best-selling author, award-winning inspirational speaker, and humanitarian who lives to illuminate, educate, inspire, empower, and ignite people to find and embrace their life purpose, live their highest vision, and forge a strong foundation to soar to success. Today on our show, we have Myles Wakeham. He is an expat Australian who lives half of his time in Scottsdale, Arizona, but the rest of his time roaming the world. Originally raised a classical musician, we have a lot to talk about. As a child, he discovered computers and technology as a teenager, yet never graduated high school. But he discovered the personal computer in 1977 and became one of the original founders of that industry. And at the age of 25, he moved to the US, was trained as a recording engineer in Hollywood, and worked at Capitol Records. In addition to that, in his career as a software engineer, he assisted in founding and building of what eventually became, I think it's called Amgen, the world's largest biotechnology corporation. He briefly returned to his home country in the mid-1990s, survived a fatal car accident in the outback of Australia that left him in a coma, and he awoke to realize that he was one of the only survivors from that crash. Well, he rebuilt himself back from this, returned to the US, became a multimillionaire, and today is embarking on building a large property development and returning to his roots in music, in the musical production industry, to build what will be the largest private recording studio in Latin America, which is going to be located in the center of Mexico. And he realizes his success came from doing the polar opposite of all of his American friends, and now teaches the art of contrarianism and what he calls financial sustainability as a methodology for breaking free of that social rat race. So excited to have you on. So juicy, Myles, and so many things we can connect on. How are you today, and welcome to the show?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. So a couple of things. I am a musician. I was brought up by two musicians. My dad was a director of music and then subsequently a superintendent of a school here in New York. And my mom was a vocal musician and a pianist. And I'm a singer. And I actually worked as a backup singer in New York City when I was much younger. Don't do the math. In New York City, when they used to have backup singers that would sit in studio to sing lines, they would come into this little room we sat in and hand us a line and say, here, go in there and sing it. And you had to read music, and I did. And I would sing the song, and then I'd go back into the little room. But every once in a while, I'd sneak out, and I would go sit with the recording engineer, because that board was magical to me, absolutely magical to me. And I wanted to know how to run it. And subsequently, I learned, the technique of that. And it is absolutely a talent to be able to mix that the engineer, as an engineer, does. So tell us more about you getting into music, being a classical musician. Tell us more about you.
Well, I probably share a lot of that in common. I grew up when I was 5 years old. My mother shoved a violin under my chin and told me that I was supposed to be in the symphony orchestra.
Okay.
And she was a concert pianist, so I get it. But, my family lived a different kind of, our priorities were different than most of my friends at school. I didn't realize that until I got older. But
Me too. I thought everybody had Frank Sinatra in their living room.
Right, exactly. And the thing is that I think musicians have a really, we don't perceive it to be unusual,
No.
but to everybody else, our viewpoint on what's going on in the world is very unusual. And I guess that became the underpinning of everything I've done in my life, because I've always lived in that unusual world. And as it happens, my mother was right. And by the age of 11, I was in the South Australia Junior Symphony Orchestra in first violins. So she got her wish. But of course, I was getting to be, moving on. I was becoming a teenager, and you wasn't going to get girls playing the violin. That was kind of the way it worked.
Kind of hot.
Yeah, well, I converted my classical training into classical guitar, and then Spanish guitar, flamenco guitar, and then eventually electric guitar. And then I'd come upon that instrument from a very different angle that everybody else who wanted to be, Jimmy Page. I wasn't like that. I was, this weird classical person that wanted to take music and sort of direct it into areas that never been before.
Yeah.
Um,
That's just a visionary. That's not weird. It's a visionary.
Yeah, yeah. And while that was going on, and I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but I had this weird, I guess you call it this right brain, left brain thing. So my right brain was always being entertained and supported with music, and I had no issue with sensitivity and understanding and empathy and all those things.
Yeah, creativity, right?
Right. My left brain wanted pragmatic, mathematic logic and problem solving and engineering. And
yeah, I thought that was because I was a Pisces. I didn't know it had to do with me being a musician.
I think that's a common problem a lot of musicians have, is this battle, Yeah. The two sides are like fighting each other for attention.
Well, because one side is in flow, one side is openness, and the other side is I want structure. And the flow side goes, no structure. We can't have structure. We can't work within confines. And the other side of our brain is like, you need confines, otherwise you're not going to get anything accomplished. So I understand the battle so clearly.
Yeah. Well, so what I did was, when I was a teenager, I said I better do something about the left side of my brain. So I ended up getting into electronics, and then that became soldering things and learning how stuff worked and pulling things apart and putting them back together. And then that turned into the fortuitous luck that at about that time, the first ever personal computer came out. And I had a paper route like all kids did back in those days. And I saved up my money and conned my dad into loaning me a couple of bucks, and went out and bought one of these things, and then took it home. And immediately there were no rules, because this was brand new. There was no one taught this stuff. So I just pulled the thing apart, worked out how it worked because I was curious, and then became a programmer of it, and then realized that everybody wanted one of these things and there weren't people like me around. So the weird thing is I conned my father. He was such a cool guy, don't get me wrong, but
persuaded.
But I persuaded him to let me leave high school before I'd even finished graduating or anything like that, to pursue this. I wanted to be a software company, I wanted to do the Bill Gates thing. And that was about that time. And I don't know, maybe it's because he was paying for a private education. It was costing him too much money. He said, yeah, whatever, kid, just go, And I'm like, okay. So off I went, and I began a career as a software developer at a time when there wasn't such a thing. And the next thing you know, I'm writing software for the universities that I would have normally have gone to, should they have had something to offer me. And then that led into government departments, corporations, transport companies. And eventually the biggest one was I wrote the billing system for a submarine manufacturer of a $5 billion submarine contract. I was 22 when I did that.
Oh my gosh, you're a savant. You're a savant.
Well, no, I was the only guy who knew how to do it. I just didn't know the answer. I didn't know what the word no meant. I just said, whenever somebody said, can you do this? I'm like, sure. I couldn't, but I worked it out, right? And that's how we...
it out. Yeah, no, that's an entrepreneur. That's a visionary.
Yeah, totally. I mean, risks, I didn't care. I mean, here's a weird thing. I learned this later in life, is that in Australia, anything on the ground wriggling around will kill you.
Yeah.
And so you learn to transcend that very early in life. Otherwise, it will destroy you.
Yeah.
So you cannot be fearful of anything, because if you were just to stop and freeze, well, the snake will bite you, or the spider will get you. So what you've got to do is you've got to be surveying around. You've got to understand risks and understand how to manage it. And then once you develop that skill young in life, you can now comfortably move forward.
Yeah.
And that's in our DNA. At least it was when I grew up. Now, and then, fast forward to that, I ended up traveling the world, got married unexpectedly, got stuck in LA. The weird thing about music for me, you probably get a kick out of this. When I came over to LA, I was 25. I got married. I did not expect this. It was like I met this girl and that's what happened.
Bam, stars.
Right. And then I walked into the United States immigration system. Oh man.
Different kind of stars.
Yeah, now that blows your mind.
Kind of cartoon stars.
Right. You know, because we think of, if you're inside the US, inside the bubble, you think of immigration as, you know, all these guys on the southern border trying to get in and, you know, all that stuff.
No.
But when you're one of those people on the outside trying to get in legally, like I was, and you got married, then you went to
Which
this
PS
world
can
of,
be done, by the way. Go ahead.
oh, yeah, yeah. But you enter the world of the dysfunctional system that doesn't work. And so what happened was I landed, had the status change, as they call it. And the next thing they said, okay, well, we'll process your green card. No problem. It's all good. But it's going to take us 12 months to do it because we're backlogged. And by the way, in that time, you can't work and you can't leave the country. I'm like, what? So I'm stuck here. I can't work while you get your backlog squared away. Yeah, that's how it works. Okay. So my wife had a job. She was off working. She was the breadwinner, and I'm sitting around the apartment like, you know, what am I top with her kind of thing. Yeah. And I'm this guy who just wrote this software for the submarine, you know, all that stuff. And so I'm kind of like, this is insane. I've got to do something. So I realized I couldn't work, but what I could do is I could go and hang out in all the music stores on, you know, Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset or Ventura Boulevard. We were in the valley. But so I did. I went to all the guitar centers, and of course they used to have these notice boards with like, you know, bands need member, whatever. And somebody advertised for a guitarist, and I said, yeah, all right, I'll do that. I got nothing else to do. So I met this ornery bunch of people who were all over the place, and ended up meeting up with this guy from Ireland who was kind of an immigrant like me, and he wanted to write songs, and I wrote songs, and he sang and I played, and we formed a band, and we didn't become, you know, Depeche Mode or anything. We just became this small band in LA, but we got a bit of notoriety in the local area, and next thing you know, we had a bass player and a drummer and everything. But next thing you know, we were playing up and down the Sunset Strip at all the clubs and getting in front of all these record label people and all these producers that, you know, had done these phenomenal things in their past. And it was like, to us, it was just like, what how did this happen?
Yeah.
And then long and behold, I was, you know, it was great. And then eventually I got the right to work. So when I got the right to work, the band and the work had to be done at the same time. That was fine, but I was still suffering from the right brain, left brain thing. And music was good, you know, left brain software stuff I was doing okay with. I decided I wanted to start recording our band. So I started learning how recording works, you know, bought all the gear, set up a recording studio at home, started doing demos. Next thing you know, one guy who's a brother of somebody who sent some people in, got a job as an A&R intern at Capitol, and he's sending me all these musicians to, you know, record. Most of them didn't go anywhere, but I'm doing demos for like Beck. I'm doing demos for bands that became something.
Right.
At the time, I didn't know that. And
they hadn't become anything yet.
Right, they're just guys I've become friends with, you know. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah. And he says to me one day, he says, look, would you like to work in a big recording studio, like, you know, full large size console, but it's this really cheap, crappy place in Hollywood which smelled of urine, and the owner would probably had a cocaine problem or something, and I'm like, yeah, all right, wherever. So he put me in the studio called Grandmaster.
What an alluring job offer.
Oh yeah, I know, and it didn't pay much, if anything. But I'm now starting to record sign bands, and I'm starting to get along with these guys and just having a good old time, and it became something really cool, and I really enjoyed it. And the reason why that's an important part in my story is that when I was about 1995, I was scheduled to record this band. I think 95, 96. I was scheduled to record this band that was coming in from out of state. I was just a house engineer, and they put me on this thing to do this band. I had no idea who it was. So I said, sure, whatever. Does it pay? That was, you know. And yeah, fine, we can give you, I don't know, $100 or something. And, you know, it was minimal. It was pathetic. But whatever. I said, I love it. I just love working here. It's great.
Yeah.
So I locked in, and 3 days before they were supposed to arrive, I get a phone call from Australia. My mother had a car accident, and I had to fly down there to take care of her. So I call up the studio owner. I'm like, dude, you know, I can't do it. I'm sorry. You know, he goes, that's okay. I got this kid from Colorado who's sleeping upstairs in the studio. He'll do it. I'm like, okay, whatever. I go back to Australia, and as it happened, I find out that she's in such bad shape that I have to stay there and have to look after her. And my wife, who I'd been married to now for, I don't know, 6 years, something like that, she came, but she didn't handle the transition to Australia as easily as I handled it to the United States, at least not in our marriage. And it's, you know, I'm sure that it's part my fault, part her fault. Who knows? It's part somebody's fault. I was too young. I cashed out all my stock options when I was working at Amgen, so I had a lot of money. I went back there, and the next thing you know, I got divorced, which was unusual because I thought, oh, where did this come from? So anyway, that's fine. Some buddies of mine saw me kind of like, you know, I was going to a dark place, you know, as you would get. Sure. They called me up and said, listen, on New Year's Eve this year, we're going to this place on the other side of the country called Queensland. You know, you got to come with us because I don't want you sitting in here in this, you know, depressed place. I said, okay, all right, whatever. I didn't really want to go, but I just did because I thought, well, whatever, got nothing else going on.
Yeah, nothing else going on, right? Yeah. We
drive up there. It's a 2-day drive. We're on the beach. We're having a good time up there. And then we finish and we come back. And on the second day, we're in the middle of the outback, you know, in the middle of nowhere in Australia. And I'm in the back seat of the car. My buddy's driving. He's hauling down this road. He goes over a rise. And then on the other, I'm reading a book. I literally remember I'm reading a book in the back of the car. And I hear splash. It's like, what? We're in the middle of the outback. This is like desert. Splash this makes no sense. Right. I look up. We're in a lake, and he's like skipping like a rock would skip over the top of the thing in this car traveling at like 100 miles an hour. And I'm going, what happened? Anyway, then everything went black. I wake up, I got the jaws of life pulling me out of the car. I got his girlfriend who was sitting in the passenger seat. She's dead. She broke her neck. She's lying on top of me. They're pulling me and her and everything apart. It's just total chaos. And anyway, they pulled me out, put me in a chemically induced coma for a week or so, and airlifted us back to our city. I find out what happened was he drove over this rise, and there was a flash flood had come through from like the night before, and it had flooded out everything. Nobody saw it coming. He hit the water and then head on into an RV coming in the opposite direction. Anyway, I was a wreck. I was in hospital for about 6-8 weeks. It wasn't pleasant. So I kind of went from like Mr. Success Story, went to America, did all this wonderful stuff, made all this money, did all this cool things, and came back and I was complete disaster. I mean, everything from hero to zero, like just like that. Lost all my money. Pulling myself. I'm in a hospital ward with 8 other guys in there. Half of them are dying of something, and it was like a MASH, bed thing. It was horrible.
Yeah. Anyway. But I noticed from like the largest tragedies in our lives or the largest challenges in our lives comes the greatest opportunity for change and for growth. Yeah. And I think that when we come back from our break, I want to go into what that change and growth was and how you're looking at the world with different perspective because of what went on. And you had an opportunity and maybe you grasped it. I'm not going to give that away. You're listening to Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. We're going to take a short break and we're going to come right back. And when we do, you're going to find the answer to this. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. I am Lorianne Casdia. If you would like to be a guest or lift up your business, product, or not-for-profit, or if you have a question or comment, please, we would love to hear from you. Just email us at healthylifestylewithla@gmail.com. That's healthylifestylewithla@gmail.com. And as you know, I am a business coach and strategist, empowering, educating, and igniting people to take action with jet propulsion. And we can help you with our proven three-step system to help provide a strategy, make it easy for visionary entrepreneurs like you to take action. If you're interested, please go to ldcstrategies.com or loriannecasdia.com. We'd be more than happy to speak to you about that. In the meantime, we are here speaking with the wonderful Myles Wakeham. He is an expat Australian and an extraordinaire individual who has had quite the life. We just left off. You were in a coma. You came back out, and thank you, by the way, and for joining us today. You came out of this coma. What happened at that point? His life must have shifted, because from great tragedy comes great opportunity for change. Did you take it?
Yeah. I learned something real simple, and it happened when I woke up. I was still in the wreck. And I just realized, I sort of, it's funny, you wake up from something like that and you go, oh my God, I'm awake, I'm alive. And the first thing I did was like, check your fingers. Yeah, they worked. Check your toes. Yeah, they worked. Okay, so I haven't got any like spinal injury. That's what I'm thinking. That was kind of where I thought at that point, oh, I can get through this. Right. At that point, I can get through this. I knew it was the hardest thing I'd ever been in, the most extreme, but I felt like I can get through it. And as it happened, fast forward, I did. I ended up coming out fine. I got remarried. I had a wonderful daughter. A few years later, I had the opportunity to return back to California again, which I did with my new family. And again, like I did the first time I was there 10 years prior, I turned up with a bag of clothes and no money and thought, yeah, I can make this work, because at least now I have contacts, like I have people. But the weird thing was, I had to be a responsible adult now, right? Playing up and down the Sunset Strip, in bands, at 3 a.m, and that lifestyle was wonderful. I enjoyed it so much, but I can't put my family and my little toddler daughter through this. They need me to be a provider. So I said, right, well, we'll go back to the left brain and we'll do the software thing. And that's what I did. And so for 20 odd years, that became my world. And as it happened, my wife is a really good, she comes from the same, we're both from Australia, and she comes from the same kind of background as me, although not maybe as extremely weird. But she understands the power of maybe good, solid, conservative investing.
Yeah.
And so we combined all of that with my energy, and the next thing you know, we started to buy investment real estate. And little by little, as I was making money, we'd put a down payment on a property and get a property, and then we'd do it again and again, and then we'd refinance it and we'd double down again. And just prior to the global financial crisis, we had, I think, about 23 rental doors, like 23 properties we were renting.
Wow.
Then 2008 happened.
Yeah, bam.
And it just so happened that the luck of the whole thing was that the property valuations dropped, and pretty much we went from, we'd literally made $1 million doing this thing in a very short period of time to zero again. And it was really stressful this time, because it wasn't like an instant thing. It was they eked it out. It was painful over a course of years or so. I mean, anybody who went through this knows what it was like.
Sure.
But I'm this stubborn SOB, and I did not want to give in, and I wasn't going to default on anything. Yeah. I would work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever I had to do to keep those mortgages current.
Entrepreneurial, visionary mindset. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm so glad I did, because after a year or so, we got ourselves back on our feet again, and then realized that the rest of the country, we were in Phoenix, the rest of Phoenix hadn't gotten back on its feet, and people were defaulting, and they were giving property away at pennies on the dollar. So I'd go down to the auction house and I'd start buying them, and I'd buy lots of these properties. And And then I partnered up with some people and we did more. And it just was this like portfolio thing. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. But I always looked back at it and thought, those banks, you know, what they did to people, it was unfair. And look, I don't want to be, I'm a contrarian. I do the opposite of what everyone does. When they're all filing foreclosures, I'm buying their foreclosures, right? That doesn't always work, but it worked this time. And I didn't want to go back to being penniless. And, you know, but I knew that when we were going through all of that stress, I called back to my former self in that car wreck. And I said to myself, if I can get through that, I can get through anything.
Yes.
And this is a cakewalk compared to that.
Yes.
And it's funny, that's how it all worked. And in the end, funny thing is nowadays, the closest people I have a relationship with, friends, they're all like military vets. Half of them have, you know, come back wounded or have PTSD or whatever. But all of a sudden, it's like they get it. If they can get through that, they can get through anything. All they need to do is summon the courage to say, you are powerful. You can get through that. You can get through anything. Don't squander that.
Yes. I know I had a personal experience where just getting up for the day was my win for the day, but I got up and I remembered, you know, stop with the pity poor me party, get yourself up and go contribute to the world, because there are people out there who have far worse situations happening. And you know, and you look at the strength of yourself and your friends who lost things, you know, parts of themselves at some cases that really contributed to the world and still are getting up and still have that positivity and still, you know, fly the American flag high because they really, really believe. And I love that. And the other thing is your website, beunconstrained.com. It's just brilliant, just totally brilliant. So bring us into that belief of the social mantra that we're all taught here in America that is so off key. Talk to us about that.
Well, wherever I'd go in the States, I'd meet people that they'd tell me their story, you know, and I love to hear those things. And I remember early on hearing stories from people when I first arrived, and I couldn't believe it. It didn't make sense. I'd have friends of mine. I met a guy who I worked with who was an ex-quality assurance manager at Rockwell, which used to be, I think they're part of Boeing now. They used to be a big defense contractor. They made missiles and stuff like that. And he's working as a warehouse manager in an audio rental company in Burbank. And it's like, this is not your job. He's in a suit and tie, and everyone else is long-haired hippies and t-shirts and flip-flops. And he's, you know, that's like, his name was Julian. I remember saying to him, Julian, why the hell are you here? Why aren't you fixing rockets and, you know, doing what you do?
Exactly.
And he'd say, well, I got a family and my kid's got autism and I need the healthcare. I'm like, what, the health insurance? Yeah. See, I came from a country where that was free. Right. It wasn't great, but it worked. You weren't going to die if you went through a car accident like I had. But Julian didn't have that. And so Julian had to take a shitty job. And, you know, that was Julian's lot. And then I'd meet lots of other Julians. And I'd start realizing, oh, gosh, money's above health. Money's above life. This doesn't make any sense. So as a musician, this makes no sense. Yeah. There's a higher power here, you know, come on, tap into it. You know, but they're not there. They're thinking, no, I've got to make money. I've got, you know, and I get it. I know what that feels like. I had to do 20 years back in software because I was trying to raise a family. I get it. I do. But I saw that. And then I saw these statistics, like 78% of people, according to Forbes magazine, are living paycheck to paycheck. They've got less money every month than they've got month.
We're not taught in America, in our school systems, anything about money. We're not taught how to deal with finances. We're not taught how to invest. It's the best kept secret ever for the top 2%. Right. And the top 2% are what's running this country right now. You know, so I'm like, we're not taught that. And there's a reason. They want that separatism. But people like you are going to help people with the freedom that comes with changing your mindset, right?
Exactly. I looked at it as a outsider. You know, I could sort of transcend it a little bit because I was on the outside, I could look in. And what I saw, I tapped into my systems background and I could see what was going on. And it was so obvious to me but nobody could see it. It was like forest and trees, right? I could see the forest. They're looking at trees like this.
Right.
And I'm like, it's so easy. You've been set up by the banks. Well, what does that mean? Well, at the age of 18, they put a student loan contract in front of you for $100,000 so you can go to some college to become, a member of the middle class. And 65% of the people graduating from the college don't practice what they learn.
Correct.
Because they do something else. So consequently, that was a waste of money and 4 years of opportunity cost. So that's stupid. In that 4-year period, I was writing software for submarines and I didn't even finish high school. Right. So how on earth is this a smart move? At least that's what, in my head, that was what, it's a business.
It's a business. Education is a business. And when we start looking at it that way, and remember, I come from 2 teachers. Education at that university level is a business. Not only do they do that, but they also throw credit cards in front of you, get you even more in debt. So you have your college loans, you have your credit card debt. Now you're constrained and now your options seem limited.
Right.
Limited.
Right. And here's the other thing, which is interesting, is that banking is a very interesting animal, but they use this term that happens after, like, let's say you're in your 20s, you want to have a house, right? I mean, the basic concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you study that, is that you have a physiological level you've got to get past first: food, shelter, clothing, right? Otherwise you don't survive. That's simple. When they start talking about shelter, the banks use this word, we all use it, we don't even think about it, and it's called mortgage.
Yes.
Well, I studied French when I was at high school. And I know what the term mortgage is, the translation, direct translation from French to English. Mortgage translates to death contract.
Yes.
So, okay, the banks want you to sign a death contract. So, okay, put 2 and 2 together. At the age of 18, they want you to sign student loans. Then they want you to sign a 30-year death contract. So if you do the math and you add it together, you're not getting out of this racket until you're 60-something.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky. So this is where it gets really weird, because when I was 22, my father passed away. He was a company man, worked for the same company for all of his life, retired at 65, died at 67.
Oh my goodness.
I had to bury him. I had to do the estate. I had to do the whole thing, which for a 22-year-old, I was an only child, so it was all on me. And for a 22-year-old, that was a big awakening, a big maturity awakening of anything. And
responsibility. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I had the chance afterwards to try to put his estate together and put it all back together again and see his story. The things that he wouldn't have told me as dad.
Yeah.
But, I would have learned understanding him as a friend, but here I am trying to piece it all together.
Yeah.
And I saw this man who devoted 40 years of his life to the same company, retired at 65, died at 67. I swore right there and then, I am not going to go down that path. That is not me. I will not do that.
Yes.
So it's funny because a few years back, I was speaking at an event in Phoenix to a bunch of financial retirement planners and financial independence people. And I gave this story about why this is messed up, right? And I said that it's not just the US, but it's statistically correct because there've been studies done. The Boeing Corporation did a study about this based on how much they needed to fund their pension program. And the idea was, well, if based on life expectancy, how many years from the point of retirement to the end of somebody's average life do we need to have in the bank to fund their pension? And they did an analysis and they worked out the people who retired at the age of 55 had an average, and this is males, had an average life expectancy of 83, which I looked at that and said, okay, that sounds about right. But then they did a study and they said, if you fast forward that to 65, because we're all being told we live longer or something and we can retire later so we have a better whatever, their average life expectancy was 67, just like my dad. And I looked at it and I went, you're kidding me. This can't be right. These numbers can't be right. But they were. And the thing is that it's been one of these like dark sort of underworld secrets of the internet that this study was ever done, because the banking and financial industry have tried to quash it. But anyway, I was giving
it doesn't serve their
the mortgage,
their
the death contract.
Yeah.
You want them going longer, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm speaking at this event. I brought this topic up and I spoke about it, and everyone's looking at me like, and I thought, okay, this is not gone over well much of
Won't
a
be hard
retirement
back.
plan as, you know. Anyway, this lady comes up to me after I'd finished. I was just cleaning up at the podium. She comes up and I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. She's going to have a piece of me. And she comes up and she said, I used to be the CFO at Honeywell. Honeywell's another big
Yes.
defense contractor.
Sure.
And she said, we did the same pension planning studies Boeing did. And I hate to tell you this, but we got the identical same results Boeing got in terms of life. And at that point, I'm like, okay, something's in this. So I went then to the government and I said, okay, what do people live to? What's the actual death? Like, what's the average life expectancy of an American, US male? I went to the CDC, you know, that agency we love because they, you know, got us through COVID or whatever. And the CDC published this number, and the current number as of 2021, which is the stats they're publishing right now, the average US male life expectancy is 73.5 years. Most people don't know that. 73.5 years. And yet the very same government in another division, another wing, Social Security or whatever, are telling you that you live longer and you should work until you're 67.
It's 70 now.
It's 70 now, right?
70.
So do the math. You're going to live for 3 years. Is that the goal?
Yeah. So they don't want you taking it early because they say you're going to lose money, and you're told that all the time. When reality at 73 and a half, you're not losing money. They're not having to spend as much.
Every single one of my American friends were told this was the plan. This is the game plan. This is what you do. Study hard, graduate, get a good job, work, retire. That's what you're told over and over and over again. And here comes this kid from Australia who says, I didn't do that. It worked out for me. and so I started with saying, well, what is the problem here? Well, the problem's very simple. We work to not work. That's the most stupid mission I've ever heard in my life.
That's why I love the Europeans.
Right.
They work to play.
Exactly.
Their whole life is spending time with family, spending time together, enjoying life, and they work just so that they can pay for that. And it's so funny and I think I've said this before, I've surrounded myself with quality people now to the point where I don't need the stuff anymore. The stuff that isn't as meaningful because I have quality people and I'm fulfilled by that. And spending time with them is the only thing I want. I don't need a thing. I just want to be around the people that I love and the people who respect me and I respect them. So I totally get what you're saying. And then, you know, I have another respect, and I've been watching the millennials. And, you know, at the beginning, I was horrified because like I said, I used to work in corporations, and in corporations, when we went to hire, we would call every 2 years somebody leaving a jumper. Oh, they're a jumper. We don't want them. They're not going to stay. Oh, they don't have a mortgage. They don't have kids. We are not going to hire them because they don't have that tie down that we're looking for. I look at millennials. I think they're awesome. They jump every 2 years. I have two of them, two sons, and they jump like every 2 years. And by 18 months, they're like, I got to go someplace else. This is too much, because they're always trying to improve themselves. They're not told what we were told growing up, which is you go to a company, you stay there the whole life, you get the gold watch, you know, you get that party at the end of your life, and then you go have a nice retirement. They are jumping, and I think it's totally brilliant because they're going after their passion, and they're trying to find where they want to be. And while they're doing it, they're discovering, you know, in order for us to know what we do want, we have to understand what we don't want in our life. And that's something that you went through. You were like, nope, don't want that. And you moved in a different direction. I think that's totally brilliant. And the same thing you do at Be Unconstrained.
Yeah. And it's about purpose. Right. Do something with purpose. Do something that you're passionate about. Even if you don't make money at it, who cares? The money will follow you if you don't follow it. I've learned that one the hard way.
Yes. Never chase the money. It will come. Just do what you're passionate about. I promise.
Be authentic and do what you're passionate about. And I was just going to complete the circle of the story, because before I was telling you when I was in the mid-90s, I was in that recording studio and that band from out of state that I couldn't record. So 2019, I'm in Mexico having some surgery. I got surgery there, and I'm recovering from it. I got nothing to do, so I'm watching YouTube videos. My wife's, you know, in this Airbnb waiting for 6 weeks while I recover. And I'm flipping around and I discover there's some documentary about the studio I used to work at. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And I find out that I look at the timeline and I find out that the band that I was supposed to record was the Foo Fighters,
Oh
the
my
second
goodness.
album of the Foo Fighters.
Wow.
And I looked at my wife, I was like white, thinking, are you kidding me? And then I realized, you know, I'm not going to live my life in regret. I might have missed that opportunity 25 years before, but I'm still a musician. I still am passionate about this. I still know the technology. And I'm wasting, my daughter had now graduated college, and so she was able to go on her own runway and her own path. And I started realizing, you know what? And my wife was so supportive about this. And I said, I have a mission now. I'm going to build that recording studio and I'm going to get back into that business. And we did. We ended up buying an acre of land in central Mexico. We're building it now. We'll open it next year, and it will be the largest private recording studio in Latin America. And I've spent the last few years traveling around the world, picking up vintage consoles and microphones and all this equipment that has its own story, and it will all reside down there and be available to anybody who wants to come down in a musical utopia and create the best work of their life. And
Oh my gosh.
that is my purpose. And
That's
that
beautiful.
people say to me, is that work? That's not work. That's passion. That's purpose. That's who I am. That's who I was raised.
Yes, and when you have passion and purpose, the money comes, and you get to do beautiful things for other people. And oh, I could just talk to you forever. Beunconstrained.com, so you could visit Myles, reach out to him if this is resonating with you. We need to continue our conversation because there's just so much more. I have so many more questions for you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I will just say one thing about the Foo Fighters, even though you missed them the first time, the trajectory that you went on is exactly what you were supposed to go on, so that you could be right here, right now, sharing the story and building the world's largest studio in Latin America. So it's beautiful. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us today on Healthy Lifestyle with Lori-Ann. I hope we have earned the privilege of your time. Again, I want to thank our guest today, Myles Wakeham. So beautiful, the conversation that we had. We look forward to seeing you next time. Until next time, I am Lori-Ann Casdia. Play a higher role, serve a higher purpose, show up for you, and show up big. Have a great day. Make it beautiful.